Well, I mean, I think, the fact is that AAC has to be a team game. And for me, that's a natural fit because my background before I became an SLP was as a direct service provider. And I think when your first jobs in the field of disability are ones that bring you very close to individuals with these kinds of needs, because I was a nurse's aide and a teacher's aide, and I worked at disability camps, and I worked at big residential institutions and in group homes in the community. And, when you come from that kind of background, it becomes apparent really quickly that anytime you set up a situation where there's one person who can support the needs of an individual, it's going to fail pretty quickly, right? If it's all dependent on one person, as great as that person is going to be, something is likely to happen so that things fall apart and that individual ends up without the supports that they need. And so really these days, the families that tend to cross my path, right, at this stage in my career, are ones that already know that they want to proceed down an AAC journey, or they've stopped and started a number of different times. So it's not so much that I'm pitching AAC to families who aren't sure if they want to go there or not. It's just a function, I think, of where I am in my career. They've come across my path because somebody's recommended that to them already. So I'm not usually now the first person to introduce them to it, which, I love both kinds of conversations, but they are really different, Lucas. So I'm not pitching the need for AAC to them. They're already there, but rather helping to help them get a sense of what the journey might look like for their son or daughter. And what I found is that working with families requires a very different approach, an approach really different than the ones that I use with graduate student clinicians, right? So I've been working with student SLPs who are learning to implement AAC strategies and tools since the late 1980s, both clinically and in graduate courses. And kind of the structure, the didactic approach that they need is pretty ingrained in me, right? Because I teach 6 AAC classes a year. I do clinical supervision in AAC 42 weeks out of the year. So my mind tends to be focused on the things that work well for beginning clinicians, right? That structure, building depth as well as breadth in content. And that's where my head goes automatically. But families require a really different approach. And I've really had to learn from those experiences, and fortunate to have worked with some amazing families. Because overall, the grad students seem to do best when we teach from a general big picture approach, right, to AAC learning. And gradually, as we build their knowledge base, help them learn to apply those general overarching principles to specific situations so that they can then be prepared to serve a wide range of clients who have, severe communication impairment. So families don't need or want that broad approach, right? They are intensely focused on their situation. And that's as it should be, right? That's their job, right? So our approach has to be almost the opposite, right? And it took me a long time to get the hang of this, right? So we partner with them to address the issues that are specific to their son or daughter or their husband or wife or their parent, right, if it's an aging parent with dementia or aphasia or Parkinson's. And over time, we help them as they're building their skills and as they're building their knowledge base for their loved one. We also help them see how the specifics of what we're doing therapeutically are built on some general guidelines and some general principles. And if we can help them kind of see those patterns, that allows them to then be better prepared to cope with change, right? Because the child is going to grow and develop, right? Or move to a different service provider, right? I'm just a blip in their life, right? But they're in it for the long haul. They're going to go to a new school. And so the specifics are all they want to focus on in the beginning, and that's fine, and that's great, and that's where we put our energies. But eventually, I think it's also important to help them see the key ingredients. What's the operating ingredient? What's the active ingredient in this little package here? Whether it's the strategies or the tools, help them discover those patterns and the principles in what they've been doing, so that they can recognize and use those as things, as a force for change as things, move forward. I would say, Lucas, beyond that, I've learned so much from families. I don't even know where to start. But one of the big things has been really starting with what their priorities are, right? So I'm used to, as a professor or as a clinical educator, I know what my priorities are, right? I know 1, 2, 3, I've got to get this student clinician knowing and understanding and being able to do these things. And I still kind of have that in the back of my mind with families. But my first job, I find, before I earn the privilege of being able to share my wish list, is to discover what's important to them. And usually they can't tell me, not in a straightforward way. It's more of an ongoing dialogue that is built around an emerging relationship that we're building. But I found that if I can somehow keep scratching to discover what some things are that are important to them, I can go a long way in helping craft an intervention plan for them that is likely to be more successful. And a big piece of that is connecting them with other families who might be a little bit further along the journey than they are. Maybe their child is a little younger, or maybe it's a little bit older, or maybe they've been doing this longer. And also, I think really being willing to partner with them and be vulnerable as a service provider, be willing to learn from them, not just be someone who feels like, oh, it's a good thing that this person came to me, the expert, but just really be on a side-by-side journey where we can learn from one another.